We're back on Let's Have It Out. On the line, we have Dino from Emalahleni. Good evening, Dino. What's your comment or question?
Good evening, sir. First of all, to the Commissioner and his team, thanks very much for the good work that you are doing. Commissioner, I'm just checking with you. Can you please tell us what happens to all the money? Where does the money go to from the fines that are levied against all these companies? For example, the one with the bread. There were millions, the company was fined millions of rand. Does that money go back to the poor to help them, or can the Commissioner tell us what happens to this money? Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much, Dino. Commissioner?
The money that comes as fines go to National Treasury in the National Revenue Fund. But consumers, of course, can claim for damages. And this was the case in bread. I think that case is still ongoing. Unfortunately, it has taken very long because we don't have a culture of class action in this country. But that case is ongoing. But also, we were very creative in remedies for the bread case, because we didn't just charge the fine. The fines were significant, but we also forced the companies to reduce the price. So we kept the margin for one of the firms, Pioneer, for 6 months as a form of recoupment for consumers. So one can be very creative about how you can kind of compensate consumers, but I think the most effective way is for people to organize themselves and claim for damages.
Okay, let's take another call. We have Colin in Johannesburg. Colin, good evening.
Yes, hi.
Hello, go ahead, Colin. Are we listening?
Yes. Okay, so sorry, my point on my question is around the school uniform issue that we face. So currently, we know that there's been a complaint lodged with the Competition Commission, but it seems like the action taken seems to be very slow or doesn't seem to be suitable. By that I mean it seems very inappropriate that we pay high school uniforms that are manufactured locally, yet they cost more than imported branded stuff. It's a glaring reality that there seems to be something wrong here. And it seems like the Commission is only suggesting to schools to look at themselves and maybe self-regulate. It's obviously not working.
Thank you.
Colin is quite right. A part of it is for people to comply. So when he talks about self-regulation, that's correct. So we do talk to governing bodies. We do talk to the schools and government departments to say that there is a better way in which you can procure uniform. Uniform doesn't have to be extraordinarily expensive. These are just kids after all. So it can be as generic as possible. Where you need to specify certain things, you can do that with having costs in mind. And most importantly, you must involve parents. Parents must be conscious about costs. And that means that when you are procuring, if you have a supplier, you must check whether they have exclusivity. If they have exclusivity, there must be a competitive bidding after every now and then. So after every 2 years, 3 years.
Isn't this actually the competition, the anti-competitive behavior here comes from the consumers, right? Because if the school governing body says, we want to procure from that particular person and that particular person chooses their own price.
Well, that's why this is partly an issue of education. You see, Colin is complaining that we are slow because we are doing two things. We are doing consumer education to say to parents and the schools that you can do better in procurement, right? Sometimes they would even have a shop inside the school, and they would be totally captured for years, for decades by this shop. But they don't have the presence of mind that you can do this differently. So part of our job is to educate.
Okay.
But we have investigations. There are investigations actually that are before the tribunal. In March, there are hearings. There are schools and suppliers we've taken to the tribunal for prosecution.
Okay, and the previous question, what happens to the money? And I want to connect this perhaps to the idea of fixing, whether or not actually this money could be helped to use to actually fix some of these problems that we face in anti-competitive behavior. Perhaps to just hand over the money to some of the smaller players. But let's hear first from your side.
I mean, the issue of resources is a real issue. Right now, for example, the healthcare inquiry, we've had to delay it. We were supposed to finish by March, but that puts us in the current financial year. So we've had to push it over to the next financial year, not because we can't do it, but if we continue, this is like an engine. If keep pumping it, you're going to consume fuel. So we also have to plan properly. So if we had more resources, and this is what we are currently discussing with government, if we had more resources, we would have a much larger scope of investigations, and we would be able to do them quicker. It takes resources to do that. The models are being discussed now, the funding models for the commission, whether you look at the portion of the fines, whether you raise some kind of a levy, I don't know, but this is something we are discussing with Treasury.
Okay, thanks. And last question, and maybe this is an accurate one. In terms of the resources that you're working on, when you are thinking about it, how wide is your pool of the people that you engage, or do you also use a much smaller pool of the people you engage, maybe like lawyers, economists, and the likes? How wide is that pool?
The market is very small. The labor market for these resources is very small. That's why they are so expensive, by the way. I mean, because there are so few people who do who are really experts in competition law. We are fortunate. We have a lot of young, bright people we are able to employ internally within the commission. They are doing a great job. The bulk of the work, we do it ourselves internally. Some of the work has to be outsourced, and that's where we spend a lot of money. But I think that the part of what we have to do is to also grow the labor pool in South Africa. So we are working with universities. We are supporting them in training people, but it's going to take time. It's going to take years. It's a new area, and it must still mature.
All right. Well, thank you, and look forward to some of the work. I think anybody can agree that we need to open this up and make sure that actually our competition law works and we become much more open as an economy and certainly as competitive. And that's all we have time for this edition of Let's Have It Out. Keep the conversation going on social media using the hashtag LHIO. I'm Kandipai, and thank you for watching. Good night.